Good afternoon. It's Jeremy Dutch with Dutch Farms. We got the next episode of the Cropcast called I think I'm going to title this Fungicide Streaks. What are they? Or maybe just streaks in general, why it happens. I'm just trying to give everybody just a little bit of information out there. I mean, I know there's a lot of stuff going on um on TikTok and things of that sort. We're being able to, see different streaking patterns and such in a high disease pressure area. I've talked a lot with Sweetwater, and it's something they've seen in the past. We've got some information and some data to show why. So, welcome. We're going to dive right into this. At some point, when everybody gets familiar with what we do, I probably won't include this slide. That is, you can find us on YouTube or this presentation again on the audio side. If you're listening on the audio, you will get about 50% of what I'm talking about here because the other part is these slides that I've put together to show pictures. So if you want to do that, go to our YouTube page, Dutch Farms, click on fungicide streaks, why they happen, and what are they. So uh, basically what I'm going to do is just go through that. But before I do, like I said, I just want to tell you what we do. We at Dutch Farms, we got a row crop business. We grow corn seed. Sorry, corn, seed beans, and every now and then wheat when it makes sense for us to do so. We've got a hog finishing operation. We've got seed and chemical division with drone spraying and cover crops under our crop service division, and then a pressure washing where we wash heavy equipment, farm machinery, that kind of stuff. So let's dive right in here. Streaks, what are they? And the point I think with this is you can see the picture here. This is obviously a fungicide streak. And so I've got a field that we actually tested to try and get an area that we didn't put fungicide on just to see what the difference between the two are. So obviously you can see that up in this area where I've made some notes. I got the field name. The wind speed was 6 miles an hour, and it was out of roughly southeast at 149 degrees was the wind actual direction. So I sprayed this north and south, kind of a 45, not quite a 45 crosswind as some of the aerial instructions tell you to do with some wind, but definitely sprayed it in the right conditions, in the right direction with the wind. And we've got these streaks. Now, one thing to notice, and this is why I just wanted to go through this, is that, in this area where we don't have fungicide, there's still streaks here. You can see if you can follow my cursor, this streak runs all the way through both the fungicide and the non-fungicide area. So let's just talk about what are streaks, where they come from. They come in many different shapes and sizes. I'm kind of saying, under my experience, streaks kind of come into some of these different patterns. These are not, somebody don't kill me in the YouTube comments here, or in the TikTok comments if we release some of these in short form. There's way more to this, but I'm kind of talking about this in an aerial view, late season, under the premise of whether it's fungicide streaks or something else. I believe that these streaks can be caused by either nutrient deficiencies, carbon penalties, nitrogen applications, whether that's a fertilizer that is organic from hog manure, chicken litter, that kind of stuff, or synthetic from 32%, that type of stuff. Any kind of fertilizer application can cause streaking. Compaction can cause streaking, and then prop wash from the actual, whether it's a drone, a helicopter, or a plane, all have to deal with prop wash. And so I think that's under this podcast, we're going to focus on those five. Obviously, there's more if you've got issues with, the way you sprayed things, whether it was a herbicide. There's a few other reasons why you could have streaks, but I'm going to focus on these. So let's talk about carbon penalty. So the picture that I have here, this is just for an illustration purpose. We look at this, and I really think that the average person would look at this and say that's got to be a fungicide streak. You might get an airplane pilot, that's crop duster, fly over that and put me on TikTok, say, this guy made some really good designs in the corn. But here's the kicker to this is that, as you can see my notes here, I sprayed this. And so the way this field lays out, these rows go east to west. I sprayed north to south. So this was actually sprayed in perpendicular to what the actual streaking is. And so what I'm chalking this up to is what's called carbon penalty. What I do know about this field, there's a couple different things that we did last year with this field. The first one is it was wheat. It was wheat that we didn't chop the wheat. We cut the wheat for baling. Operation came in, baled the wheat, wanted the wheat, and then they put on hog manure. I'm sorry, not hog manure, cattle manure. And I believe in my mind, what this is where we windrowed all of this and we've got carbon penalty. Just to further illustrate that, this is the same field. Now we're looking north to south in the pattern that I sprayed versus east to west, which where it's planted, how it was planted with wheat, how it was combined. And you can still see the streaks are perpendicular to the actual sprayed pattern. So as you look at this is a streak that I'm saying is probably carbon penalty. And as I count these rows, here's how I'm trying to decide what all this is too. Is it, if I count the rows from this light mark to this light mark, it's roughly between 30 and 35 feet. Now I got a 35-foot draper head. And how I'm doing that, I plan on 30s. I can count the rows. I know roughly what the distance between these two are. If it was closer to 40, and it was maybe just a tad narrow, I probably would assume maybe it was a nitrogen application or something along those lines. So I'm chalking this up to carbon penalty. We're going to call this streaking carbon penalty. The next kind, sorry, my mouse went a little bit too far. The next kind is what I'm going to call nutrient and nitrogen issues. Now this, we've got a streak about every 16 rows. And if you're following my cursor online, you're going to be able to see this. So there's a streak here. It's very uniformed as where these streaks are. Now, what I know about this field, and this is why I'm kind of using this picture, is that this field, from the lighter area up in this area, there's a darker area there that's on a line that was actually applied hog manure last year. You can notice that there's less streaking in there because I think there's more nutrients and nitrogen available in this area. Where you see it up here, we did not apply hog manure, and we have a 15 knife applicator. It's a Fast 8100. What it does is it puts a double rate on the outside row where the guess row is. So where the actual guess row is, there is not a line of 32 that's ran there. There's a double rate on one side of the plant and a double rate on the other, but not in the middle. And so this type of streaking, when we're talking about streaks, what are they and how to identify them and what's the cause of them? This streak I'm saying is definitely nitrogen. And we've seen this in the past. Now you can have other types of streaks just because, and I'm going to call this, roughly some kind of nutrient, or other fertilizer type deals. And that is that, you can see a line here. We actually put this hog manure on in an east to west. This is north and south. It's planted north-south. We applied hog manure east to west. We've got really good coverage. You can see it's all uniform here. But if we didn't do a really good job of putting down that hog manure, you would see perhaps maybe where my guess row was is where I had too much overlap or some kind of flow issue. You would see this lighter showing up in this darker, and that can be a nutrient or nitrogen issue. And then the last area, this is pretty self-explanatory, but we do see this in fields in different areas where there's low pockets. This is a low, used to be actually a cooling lake for a milk factory. We filled it in, but it's still, it still is a low spot in the field. Water stands here. It's either leached out, some of our nutrients there, or doesn't have enough oxygen per soil and water ratio. But, that's a nutrient deficiency area along with some of the other problems we're seeing in here. So, I just wanted to show you, hey, there's more than just fungicides that causes these streaks and how to identify them. The other streak that I see that, for basis of this um, cropcast here is compaction. And, compaction will show up in your field as well. And it's amazing at times you can actually get up, take a drone up, and you'll be able to see exactly where your dump cart ran. But in this area, this was corn on corn. I'm not attributing these streaks to a carbon penalty because we don't win, we don't chopper stalks in windroam or anything like that. This is what I know is there's an actual gate right here. You can see my pickup truck up in this area. There's a gate right here, and we usually stage trucks along this area, and the dump cart runs up in this area. This is about a mile, not quite a mile long field. But we try to keep our highways in certain areas. And so some of the streaking that you're seeing, I think, in these areas, some of these areas where we're running with the cart. Now, over in here, you can see some issues. We've had some test plots, some lighter soil. There's some other issues that go around here, but for basis of illustration, like I said, I'm talking about a few different ways of where streaks show up. This, in my mind, is what compaction looks like. And again, this is just me knowing my fields. And so if you know your fields, we can start going through, hey, what was planted last year? What was your fall tillage program? Where did the cart run? What's your nutrient package look like? When did you apply N? Genetics, all that kind of stuff, and start to try to narrow this down. So I've got an example streaking here of compaction from the dump cart. Now, this here is definitely fungicide. And so you've got your green areas versus your brown. This is not quite 30 feet. I was putting this application on at 32, 30, between 30 and 32. But you can see uniformly, this is where my drone ran. Now, you've got green versus brown areas. Now you can tell, I stayed purposefully away from this path and stayed around here. So you can tell where there was definitely no fungicide. You can tell where the fungicide started. You can tell where it stopped. This is our little check. And then you can see in between here. And so let's talk about what this is and why it's here. And so I've got a couple bullet points here to talking about this. And so this is in my previous cropcast, I talked about, lessons learned, and one of them is genetics mattered. This is an actual, these are Bayer genetics. This is definitely a racehorse die and dry type variety. It's got a little less defensive package than some of the other ones that we're seeing. And then it's also last year was bean ground. So I originally had thought that potentially this was carbon penalty, but as I got out in it and started walking, it makes a little bit more sense to me, along with talking with Sweetwater and some of the data they have of why this happens and whether or not it matters. So just a review, I'm going to back these screens up. I'm saying carbon penalty here. I'm saying nutrient nitrogen issues here, compaction here, and this is fungicide. Now, does this matter? Well, I'm not quite sure, but I know that everybody deals with it. And why does it happen? It happens because of prop wash. And so this is a field, an aerial. So this is one that I sprayed with the drone. This is a field. I honestly, I don't farm this field. I applied fungicide next to it. You could kind of see it down in this corner here. And as I was up scouting it, I saw this, and I just wanted to take this picture for just illustration purpose to let you know, hey, it's not just drones. I don't know if this is a ground rig. I don't know if it's an airplane. Don't know if it's a helicopter. But to me, it appears that it's not a drone because these streaks are a little bit wider than that. So it happens. In full disclosure, it happens to everybody. The aerial applies, and it happens due to prop wash. And the reason why it happens to prop wash is because we've got either one of two things. And if we go to the next video, next screen here, you see the streaks a lot of the times in either with drones or helicopters because the prop wash works its way down in almost an up-down axis versus airplanes, their prop wash is behind them as they move forward. Now, a couple key points, and then I got a video here that I'm gonna show you. A couple key points about prop wash is that the airplane itself, um, in this, I kind of think might be an airplane. The airplane itself will tend to wash side to side on the boom and use and have your coverage not as well, just due to the type of wash that it gets because it moves forward to back. The helicopter and drone being top to bottom, its prop wash pushes it down. And so the downdraft, here's our thought process with this and why this happens. I'm going to show you some data, some historical like yield data to prove this. Is that in all fungal diseases, it starts from the ground and works its way up. And what our real goal for fungicide application is to protect the leaves at canopy that are going to be using the most photosynthesis to keep those from dying. Now, what ends up happening with drones in particular, because we don't have a boom that we can adjust the angles of the nozzles, is that we move the corn back and forth quite a bit where the actual props are. That causes the actual fungicide to get farther down on the stalk. And as the disease moves its way up the stalk, it prevents it from moving up higher than some of the product that just naturally laid over the top. And so what we're saying is these streaks that you see, if I back up 2 screens, these streaks you see here is right underneath the drone, and it's right where the corn is moved a lot side to side due to the downdraft, and it's pushed product farther down the stalk. And so we've had a slightly lower control for the fungal diseases that are creeping up than we would out at the overlap areas where it's laying it down on it. Now, the big question is does this affect yield and what happens? So we're going to get into some data to just show you that, but I just want to show you a quick video, and we're going to show you this to show our theory behind it and why we think it happens. And so as I get this, I want to pause it right there, and you can see how much this isn't a video of my drone. You can see how much we're moving this stalk back and forth. And as you look at that, you can see this is where we're pushing it down into the crop quite a bit as we move across the field. And that's actually putting product farther down on the stalk. It's given us a little lower fungicide control rather than at the guest rows. Now, does it matter? Does it affect yield? Here's the next slide. So this was taken, this is an aerial shot taken a couple years ago down south. They had some high disease pressures. What we've got here is some area that did not get fungicide, and we've got area that did. You can see the streaking in the similar style that I'm showing you, and then the correspondent yield map here. The red is where it wasn't applied. It shows lower yield. The green where it was applied shows better yield. Now, those of you, if you've operated a combine, you know some of these correlations between the yellow and the green, it's hard to match up and say, is this exactly in the middle of where the drone was running versus the outside? But you can see there's 2 areas of the field that definitely have some kind of issue, whether that's, soil type, whether that's nutrients, pH, who knows? We could dig into that a little bit more if we had some of the data, but we've got this area here, which is obviously showing poor yield, and we've got this area over here that's showing good yield. And the difference is that obviously where we put on fungicide, it still's better where we didn't. And I can't necessarily correlate this to say that the streaks really did matter. Otherwise, we probably could see some darker areas or darker streaks on this. So I'm certainly, as myself as a drone operator, I'm willing to learn and I'm willing to get better. But I also think that there's a misconception out there as to what's affected and what's not. So just a couple more things before we close out this cropcast. Um, I've got some photos just to show you what I've seen, some of my lessons learned. If you're following my cursor right up here, this was corn on corn, and this was bean ground last year. This was put on with the drone, this was put on with the plane. Now, two different fields, very similar to each other, just across the road. So there's probably similar climate. There might be some variance in soil types, but one thing I do know is there's a pipeline that came through here and some of this soil got disturbed. And we've naturally seen, variations just because this got dug up and replaced and, it's just not holding nutrients like it did. But if you look at this, the drone in the corn has pretty good coverage. I think the plane has good coverage too, but there's areas that are showing up where it either wasn't as effective or soil types where it isn't here. And the thing that I'm attributing to this is it's bean ground versus corn ground. For some reason in 2025, I've got way better coverage on all my corn on corn acres than I do beans on corn acres. And so I'm just trying to illustrate that there's good coverage here. And I think there's good coverage here, but we're seeing more disease pressure on stuff that was beans last year. Same thing over here in the picture that's called Zolara FX. This was sprayed, both these were sprayed with the same product. Both were sprayed with Zolara FX. They are a different variety, so but they're both Corteva. I do know these are both Corteva varieties. I do not know what genetics are on this field here, but on this field we've got Corteva, similar soil profiles. I farm both sides of this road, so similar soil profiles. But we're noticing here this was bean ground last year, and this was corn ground last year. So as you're making, if you're looking at videos and you're trying to decide what happened, these are some of the correlations that I'm seeing. Is it for whatever reason bean ground, we're seeing higher disease profile than we are in the corn ground, which sometimes doesn't make a lot of sense. So I don't know why we're seeing that. And then over in here, I just wanted to show you the difference between genetics. So what I showed you in the slide before, we had bean ground versus corn ground. And then in this slide, what I'm showing you guys here is that both of these fields are bean ground, but they're Bayer genetics versus Corteva genetics. And so this is a Bayer genetics field. And so you can see we had bean ground last year. These are Bayer genetics. Again, this is that same style of that's actually that same variety that I showed in the very first picture. Racehorse, die and dry, not a real high disease package. This is a Corteva genetics that does have a higher disease package. So, my thought and where I'm going with all of this is just it's a little bit more information that backs up some of the lessons learned on the previous cropcast. And if we go back to some of those lessons, one of the lessons is that earlier fungicide was better. Early applied, I think, held up better. Genetics mattered. There's a big thing of this year with disease packages and the amount of disease pressure we had. And then, crop rotation mattered as well this year. So I've just got pictures to kind of illustrate all of that. And then, that's pretty much the conclusion. I mean, we can go back and look at some of these real quick if you'd like to see them. What I'm going to do is once we get this field harvested, I'm going to post the yield map so you guys can see what the yield map looked like. But those are streaks. Those are the things that I'm seeing. I'd be happy to have a conversation with anybody if they'd like to. You can reach out to me, Jeremy Dutch at DutchFarms.com. That's DOETCH farms.com. We're on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube. Just search us as Dutch Farms and you'd find us. So appreciate everybody tuning in. Got any questions? Reach out to me. Thanks. Bye.